What is a scene?
A scene is like one step toward the bigger picture. So in the scene, you're looking at who wants what and what is getting in the way. Who wants what is getting in the way, how do you create the small piece of the bigger puzzle through looking at the scene and also understanding what is the conflict in the scene is a struggle that I see a lot of writers go through. You often will find scenes that have no conflict and you have no sense of who wants what and what is getting in the way. So by simply understanding the scene as a part of the greater picture and how you are creating a step toward an outcome while escalating the conflict is an important part of scene work.
What happens in a good scene?
A good scene is a strategic approach to how does the scene serve the purpose of advancing the external plot as well as the internal with the character development. So a good scene brings us into the personal so that we feel the personal as well as understanding how it's a step in the external plot.
What do a lot of new writers get wrong when they write scenes?
I would say the biggest thing that I see writers get wrong with certain scenes is they forget that I remember I came upon 3 things that I thought about should be in the scene, and the idea is the desire, the conflict, and the conflict being the flaw. So you're looking at the want, the conflict, and the why as a part of a scene. And when you have a scene where we lose sight of what does the character want, what is the main goal, and we don't feel it in the scene, that is probably one of the biggest mistakes I see made. When I get halfway through a script and I look at a scene because I'm feeling lost, because I lost the why, the want, and the conflict with the flaw.
So there's no filler scenes in movies where those elements don't exist within each one. Like there has to be that to move the story along.
There's value if there's that. I think that you can, as we talked about rule breaking, I think you can always find a way to, voice trumps a lot of the rules. If we feel the voice in a scene and yet there is one of the 3 components I mentioned missing, then the voice can make a difference. And if we understand how that scene is a part of the bigger puzzle and understand the intention of the writer within that, then again, you can look at rules and say the writer was able to communicate a message without having to have specific things.
You look at, let's say, Sideways. I know it goes a few years back, but it seems like in every scene, Miles is in a dilemma with himself, really,
yes,
because he feels so inadequate,
yes,
whether he wants to blame others for it, but he's always, something relates to that he's being slighted somehow.
Yes. Well, that's because of the flaw work and the flaw that we feel stemming from the wound that we're feeling a part of from the beginning, and how there's an escalation of that. But also not feeling in that movie that there's a full understanding of the want in a way that is transformative with the character. Like looking at the want and going, all right, what specifically does this character want, and how the sideway pursuit is bringing the character to that point. In that character, if I remember correctly, and it's been so long since I've seen that film, but that film really resonated. Certainly from someone who's been through divorce, someone who knows what pain looks like and what the healing process looks like. I feel like that was a film that everyone identified with, and certainly the whole Merlot aspect of the wine industry and all that. Like, it stays with you, and you remember that character because of the wound and the flaw work, and looking at the transformation within it. That story has stayed with me. So that is a good example of looking at it in the way that you're talking about.
Right, because it seems like there were no really useless scenes in that film whatsoever. Everything set something up where Miles was going to somehow feel badly about himself.
Yes.
And luckily he had this other component, which was the Thomas Hayden Church character, who felt so incredible about himself,
yes,
to remind him of how low he was. So there was always this tension of, here was this person on a pedestal and here was Miles.
Yes.
And it was a wonderful
And what
friction.
you tapped into that's so good there is polarity. When you have polarity in story and you have one character who's weak where the other is strong, and vice versa, then again, that's something very universal in life. Polarity is another thing for me, like Dilemma, where there was this massive aha, and Sideways is an excellent example of looking at how polarity adds so much depth to story and to character transformation.
What does it mean to start a scene late and leave early?
To start a scene late means your audience could feel stuck with how the scene is fitting into the overall picture. And to end it early, there is a term called the button of a scene, where we feel the button at the end of the scene that's in the overall meaning of the story. So you also want to look at scenes as, in another respect that I thought about in talking about this, is your scenes should always set up where your character is going to next. So another mistake that writers make in scenes is we should never arrive in a scene and not know how we got there.
Interesting. I'm thinking of Sophie's Choice.
Yes.
And one of the many incredible scenes in the film is where the Kevin Kline character arrives home late.
Yes.
And finds her drinking with the neighbor, and just sort of the tension in the room. And so I guess it's been a little bit since I've seen it, but just how those scenes were set up, because there was always like a weird implication of something, but we didn't know totally what it was. We didn't know what Sophie was. We knew some things she was dealing with. We didn't know everything.
You didn't know everything, and that's where scene work comes in handy as far as the whole linking aspect. I remember another thing that I remember from Jeffrey Kitchen was the idea, and I learned this at the beginning of my career as an executive: take a script from the back to the front and make sure that every preceding scene sets up the next scene. And it was a great tool. So easy, like it still stands in my mind. And when I covered procedurals as a current executive, it particularly came into play of, oh my gosh, that I get that. That's something that stays. And there are so many scenes where you're like, how did we get here? What is this? I didn't feel the setup, and because you didn't feel the setup, it's because the writer didn't do the setup, and the significance of setting up where the character is going next, or having a puzzle, as you're mentioning, that we understand how it fits the greater picture. And if we don't understand, then that comes down to the writing.
And even for time lapses, let's say I realize every scene is usually involves a time lapse, but like a major yearly or decade time lapse.
Yes.
How are we playing with the scene in that, or tying them together?
I think the time lapses are interruptive like the flashbacks. So you need to know when you are going to have a time lapse how that affects the overall goal. Like if in the middle of a script you have a 10-year jump, then you're going, well, how does that affect the initial goal? I remember there was a show that I think in editing they probably shifted it. If I remember correctly, I think I read an article on it. There was a show called The Night Manager with Hugh Laurie where they did do, in the middle of the pilot episode, they did a time jump. However, the goal remained the same, because the goal still had to do with bringing the arms dealer down. So that was a time jump that worked. So I always think when you're doing time jumps, it needs to have a strategy, just like your arc of growth has a strategy, just like your story arc has a strategy. Your time jump can't take us out of where we feel the main plot is going. We need to understand how the time jump factors in to the goal.